Hi guys, and welcome back to the painting channel. Today I've got something completely different. I know I always say it. Let's roll that intro. Let's see what happens. Hi guys, and a very warm welcome back to the painting channel. Now, as I said at the start, it is something completely different for you this week. Ordinarily right now I will be getting ready to put my brush to paper and showing you the processes on a tutorial of how I complete one of my paintings. I'm not, however, going to be painting this week. I really do hope you don't mind too much. There are a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, of the last few weeks, which has just culminated this weekend and this week into a massive work where I've been putting together a brand new painting course ready for launch either next week or the week after. It's a watercolor course. It's quite an extensive one. It's all about painting skies. Now I'm going to put links underneath the details in this video, and it'll also be up on my social media at some point and also on my website. So if you want to look at that and see what's involved and see what you're going to get, take a look. You'll be welcome to do so. Now, the thing also is that I was asked by one of my, or in one of the comments, would I let them know, or at least give some indication of some of the watercolor books that I enjoy and like, and some of the artists that I follow, or at least have inspired me. So I felt instead of just writing a list down for this person, I would actually make a little video, because I'm sure that maybe some of you out there might find this of interest too. Now, when I say watercolor books, in my library I have an immense amount, but I also have twice as many oil painting books, and I have heck knows of drawing and pastel and individual artists that I have admired over the years and collected books from or of. So this is just scratching the surface today. I have looked at my library. I've picked a few of my favorite books out and by a few of my favorite artists, and I'm just going to talk about some of those. I don't know how long this video is going to be, but I do hope you find it interesting, and yeah, we'll just see where it goes. All right. Okay, so where do I start? Okay, so what you're going to be seeing here is a predominance to begin with of the name Ron Ranson. Now, Ron, in his day when he was with us, he was an eminent watercolorist in his own right, but he also made a lot of books and studies of other artists that were fellow artists of the day, people like John Yardley, Edward Wesson, even Trevor Chamberlain. And all of these artists are fantastic artists of the last century. I enjoy the work of each and every one of them. For instance, you've got things like, look at these watercolors. I mean, you don't, it just so there. I mean, you can just have one book and learn so much from one book. And I have been lucky to have been able to collect some of these. Some of them you can still get, and some unfortunately are very hard to find. But if you do find them, then snap them up, because they are really well worth buying. Ron did a great job of putting these together, these books, and I think that they are a fantastic addition to anybody's collection or library when it comes to watercolor. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's mind-boggling, and you think to yourself that, oh, that's got a little bit of a stick there. You know, you look at it and you think, oh wow, I wish I could do that. But it's not so much a case of I wish I could do that. I think it's a way to aspire. I think that you use these books to study, to look, and indeed you can also use them, as I have done, to do like master copies, master studies, where you take an odd piece of paper, you look at the way that the painting was created, in whichever one it is, doesn't really matter, and you try and reverse engineer that. You try and recreate that painting yourself. And I've done that many, many times. I've mainly done it to people like Edward Seago. I've done a couple of Ted Wessons, and I've done a couple of John Yardleys, and with mixed degrees of success, I've got to say. But the idea was there to try and see how that artist went about studying the way that, was it a hard edge, a soft edge? Would he have put that in dry brush? Would it have been damp? Would it have been wet in wet? All these little processes, all the lovely, I forget the name for it. I want to say staccato. I'm not sure if I've got that right. And please be free to correct me in the comments if I've got it wrong. But the ability to leave white space around your painting is so important. And yeah, I mean, you can see it all over the place in paintings just like this. But this is just one artist of very many that I love. John Yardley, Trevor Chamberlain. This one's called A Personal View. And I'm not sure of all the those who wrote them. I believe this may well have been by Trevor himself, but I can't actually confirm that. But let's just have a look at some of the paintings in here. Now, Trevor, to my knowledge, was not just a watercolorist. He was also, or is also, an oil painter. But these are predominantly all watercolors in here, and you can see very, very different to John Yardley, but nevertheless still absolutely masterful when it comes to the paintings that he created. I just love some of this stuff. And look at the grain, the granulation in that pigment running through there. And you know, some people think, oh my Lord, I can't have that. That just doesn't. It works, and it just, you can. It's almost, you can feel the wind in the air, the breeze in the trees, and I love it. And it's just so expressive. But it doesn't matter who among these peers in watercolor that you look at, they are an inspiration. And never ever let them become a reason that you stop painting. You should look at this and be absolutely inspired and use them as an aspiration to move forward in your own work. But you can learn so much from them, and you can learn so much from copying them and dissecting them and seeing where it takes you. But looking at the way the colors work, the skies, he's done another granulated sky through here with that, I would have said maybe a violet, an ultramarine violet, something through there, or it could have been ultramarine with a bit of alizarin in there, just to run that color through. And you've got an exquisite sky coming down, radiating the light. And look at how this building is dominant, contrasty, and everything just says what it should say, and it just works. Anyway, I do get going when I get looking at some of these books, I've got to say. Now, these are just a few of the books that I've got. I'm going to put these down, and I'm just going to quickly look at something else in a minute, but I'm going to put one to one side and leave it. Now, I can't go through all of Ron Ranson's books without looking at the great man himself. He was noted for using these big Hake brushes and large brushes in his work, and you know, there's a lot to be said for that. When we all pick up a small brush because we feel a little happier at that, we feel more at ease with a smaller brush, we feel that we've got greater control, I think that that's when it can work against us. And sometimes that big bold brush gives us loose energetic marks in our watercolor, and it's so easily forgotten. But this book, nonetheless, it goes through a lot more elementary types of painting. So if you're just starting out in watercolor, I would recommend look out for this book, because it's been written by a master, and it goes through some very elementary types of painting figures, setting up the palettes, looking at trees. Sadly, the book was done back in the day when creating lots of color plates in a book was very, very expensive. So a lot of paintings and a lot of things like this were put out in black and white, which made them a little cheaper to produce the book. That is sad in many ways, but it does happen. But where you get a color one, enjoy it, because it's so simple. Look at that. Such a simple and very elementary painting to make. It's got a sky wash. It's got a few trees put on later. But look at all this white paper just left. And that's all it needs. And it doesn't have to say any more. So, yes, Ron Ranson. one book that I would certainly, if you're starting, look out for. And I will put all the ISBNs and details to all the books that I'm showing you today in the details underneath this video. That's quite a few, isn't it? Well, we'll see. I'll put most of them in anyway. All right, and maybe a few more. All right, let's get rid of that one out the way. And we can't go further without looking at Edward Wesson, Ted Wesson, to people who knew him. But again, they were all sort of in the same sort of school. I'm not sure who came first, Ted Wesson, John Yardley, and others, but they were all sort of in the wake, I suppose, of another fantastic master and a legend in my eyes was Edward or Ted Seago, and I will be talking about him in a moment. And yeah, Ron Ransom was in there as well. But the thing about Edward Seago, he set the scene, he set the benchmarks for so many people who followed in his wake. The likes of John Yardley, the likes of Edward Wesson, all of these people were sort of devotees in a sense, as I understand it, to Edward Seago. But, you know, even some of the motifs, you know, the sailboats on the Thurn around Norfolk, all of these things were created. Now, some of these are not watercolour in this book. Some of these are indeed oils, but there are watercolours too, as you can see. Lots of watercolours, beautiful watercolours here and here. Very, very simple motifs, and you'll see very similar motifs with Edward Seago. So you can get a little glimpse into the way that people like Ted Wesson and John Yardley were painting, because they had this sort of foot firmly placed into English watercolour of the day and the works of people like Seago, who went before. Okay, now, well, I mean, Seago, not being funny, I'm pretty sure Seago would have been around. He didn't die until 1970, 71, so, or it might have been 74, one of those dates anyway. That's when sadly the world lost Edward Seago. So these guys would have been around painting as his contemporaries at the time, but they would have been maybe a generation later, and certainly in the school of. All right, so look at that, how simple that is. You've got that beautiful iconic building, that lovely cathedral, which is Blythburgh Church in Suffolk. But look how simple that shape is. It tells you all it needs to do. And this big sky, it's so expressive, but not done with a small brush at all. So things like that are really important to consider. All right, so I don't know how long I've been filming for, but this could end up quite a long video. I hope not. Anyway, I just get excited about all these books, and I think you should too. I think if you've got a collection of books, they should come off your shelf regularly and thumb through them for inspiration and for ideas and ways forward, especially if you've got the blues. If you know, sometimes as artists, we do get an artist block. I've heard it called many things, burnout, artist block. Sometimes you sit there and in the morning and you know you should be working, you know you should be painting, and for some reason you just cannot get it together. You just cannot seem to find that motivation to get out into your studio and start work. And sometimes it takes just looking through something like this over a coffee or a cup of tea, whatever your fancy, and just get re-inspired, reignite that light and that flame, and then come out and start work. And I've often used these as inspiration, and I love it. I love it to death. I really do. Look at that. It's so beautiful. Anyway, and that is stunning. I know it's not a watercolor, but that is just stunning. This, however, is a watercolor. Look how that sky works. Okay. Now, I do see one or two artists in the modern day paint very, very similar to this, and it really is a beautiful way of painting. And it's not easy. It may look simple, but unfortunately these things are not always easy. Being expressive, having the confidence just to lay down a colour and not touch it again is not easy to do. We all look at something and we find that, oh, we want to do something with it because it's not quite where we want it to be. Got a little mark in there, want to change that. And the moment you start playing with it, you're lost. And I have fallen foul of that so many times. Every time I go to, I think and try and check myself. Sometimes I do, sometimes I go in at my cost and I have to start the painting again. So yeah, I'm sort of diving around in all parts of this, I've got to say. Another Ron Ranson, again, another book that is all about techniques, dry brush. Again, this is an early book, but if you are looking at starting in watercolor, not a bad one to pick up if you can find one. I love anything like this, and I'm always looking for new titles that I don't actually own right now. But this one, as I say, it's an older edition, and because of that, most of it is in black and white. But there is still information to be gleaned and still information to learn from. So that's another Ron Ranson book there, and that's all about his technique. Trevor Chamberlain again. Lots of Trevor Chamberlain stuff that I've got. Love it. Look at that as a watercolor. I mean, there's so much color and life in there. You've got this person in this beautiful, vivid blue color right in the distance there. But it doesn't look out of place. It looks just as it should do. And the excitement of this statue. It is an outstanding piece of work. But I love it. But it is an oil, sorry. Just realised it's not a watercolor, and we are talking about watercolors. But I just saw it and it just stopped me. Yeah, it's beautiful. It really is. But you can see that in watercolor too. So forgive me for getting confused for a moment. But I saw it and I got quite excited by it. But there's so much work in here. Beautiful watercolors. Look at that. Soft infusions of greens and other colors coming in, allowing the bleed of colors. You can imagine doing clouds in the same way, and you can just allow that light color to come into your blue sky, for instance. This is no different. It's just the same technique, different colors and a different purpose. We're looking at trees and not skies, but you get the idea from that. But this is another excellent book of watercolors, paintings and oils. So as I say, Chamberlain works in both mediums to my knowledge, and so well worth looking out for. Okay, now for some of the big hitters as well. In the day, sadly no longer with us, is Roland Hilder. Now these books are quite easy to pick up. They're about £20-30 each now. If you pay a lot more, I would wait and find a copy, because I've found these for a lot less money than some people think that they're worth. And yes, they are out of print. Yes, they are worth getting hold of, but they're not worth a fortune. And so just be mindful of any of these books. Some of them are very, very expensive. They're out of print, but they are so looked for and sought after that they do command quite a price today. Some of them I'm glad I bought back in the day when they were released or first out, but now they are so expensive. But these ones certainly don't come into that category. Roland Hilder was a non-native British person. He was born and moved to England when he was just a child. So mainly he's English, of course. But he was one of our foremost watercolorists, landscape painters. And he had some very particular styles. Now I have done videos on my channel, and I put a link up there or there, one of them, I think it's that side. I put a link there to some of the videos that I've done where I've looked at Roland Hilder's style and his skies and tried to replicate those in my own painting. I have also done master copies. I've done a master copy of this particular painting, and it's never going to go out anywhere. I'm never going to sell it. It sits in a drawer, and that's it. I look at it from now and again and I judge it compared to that, and I think, yeah, it was not bad, or it's rubbish and I ought to do it again. But the thing is that you learn from doing these. You understand how the painting was put together and the way that the artist created that work. And you may not get everything spot on, and some of your drawing or your colours may be a little off. but at least you go through the process of learning what that artist did. I might well do a couple of master copies in future videos. Might be worth putting out there, see what you think. If you like the idea of that, put it in the comments underneath this video and I will see what I can come up with. But Roland Hilder is a real hero of mine, along with Edward Seago and all the aforementioned artists. They really are heroes of mine. But this book, this particular book, which is called Painting Landscapes in Watercolour. Now be mindful, this book was actually produced in England and America, and it had different covers, similar title as well, but different cover. The content inside was identical. So the thing is, I've known several people that have bought both copies thinking they're getting different books. In fact, it's the same book. So just be aware of that. But yeah, it is just a stunning collection of how to step-by-step guides. So, you know, he goes through the entire process from the initial drawing and the washes over the top, and it gives you fantastic insight as to how the painting came together. Little aspects here right up into that point there. You can see that beautiful swipe of the brush, very dry brush, and works so well. But he combined that dry brush effect very, very well with these subtle washes. It's almost an extreme going on. There was no sort of middle ground. There was, but not as much. The extremes were very much in evidence, where you had a beautiful subtle wash for a landscape, and then all of a sudden a big swipe of dry brush, big brush effect right the way across, creating the field and the furrows in the field. Lots of that sort of stuff went on. Things like this, you can see that dry brush swept right down through there, almost creates the water in one single brush mark. Fantastic. But it is nonetheless very, very inspirational. And I know this video is getting longer and longer, but I'm just getting really excited by all these books. Another one of Hilda's books, and again, it's just full of lots and lots of information. Really worthwhile if you're into English landscape painting, or indeed converting the same sort of styles to wherever you happen to live. But it's well worth trying to seek these books. Many of the motifs between these artists, many of the motifs were actually studied. You know, things like a lot of repetitious motifs, such as Thames barges and coastal scenes, Suffolk, Kent, Essex, and all these different places where you got coastal towns and lovely, beautiful scenes to paint. And many artists would sort of roll up and do the same sort of scene, same motif. And so you see lots of things repeated from one book to another, albeit created differently. But you can see this one here, this area. I love this area. This is all marshes. This is I think the boathouse. Oh no, sorry, that's Pin Mill. What am I on? He's also done all marshes, but there's a boathouse there with Thames barges. I've painted that. He's painted that. Others have painted it. And here, Pin Mill. I've painted it. Edward Seago's painted it. Roland Hilder and countless other artists, both past and present, are always painting Pin Mill. It's iconic. So yeah, there we go. Let's put that one to one side. There is yet another one. I'm just showing off. But look at that. Now, a very good friend of mine gave me this book recently, and I'm so pleased that they passed it on to me, because it is an exciting, albeit a paperback, it is an exciting book to have. Really am so pleased that I've got this one. All right. So the last few books that I've got really deal with one person and one more person. Now, Sargent, how can you do a book review, in a sense, this is not book review, but how can you talk about watercolor books without talking about the outstanding work of people like John Singer Sargent? Now, known mainly for a society painter and painting oils, he was nonetheless absolutely marvellous at painting watercolors. And this book is the only one that I know that they created on John Singer Sargent's watercolors. I got so excited when I saw this once, I bought it. only realizing that I actually already had a copy on my shelf. So I actually have 2 copies of this, but I don't care. I really don't. But all of these watercolors are absolutely outstanding. And once again, master copies, learning from his work. And I heard stories, I don't know how true, but I heard stories that, you know, Sargent sort of almost moved to Giverny just to be closer to Monet. And I like to think, even if that's not true, I just like to think it's so lovely to think that artists of his stature would sort of roll up hoping for an audience with the then great master Monet. And, you know, there's just something about that. And, you know, we would all rock up to John Singer Sargent's studio and say, can you grant us an audience? No, I'm not. But you know what I mean. It is just a lovely thing to think about. But Sargent was an absolute master at the way he created his watercolors. So again, you've got a lot you can learn from this, and a lot to be gained by having a copy if you want one. Now, this isn't a cheap book, unfortunately, but it is certainly well worth getting. It's currently on the market, so you can pick one up brand new without having to pay some exorbitant fee from somebody. These, however, these are getting a little bit harder to get a hold of, and these ones especially. Now, these are, again, the great Ron Ranson. He did an awful lot of work on Edward Seago, and these were the first 2 books that I bought way back. And this one is in hardback. You're not going to get that anymore in hardback, I don't think, not without paying a small fortune. And both these books are not cheap to buy, as I understand, but that doesn't matter. I mean, the fact that I have them now, these are filled with oils and watercolors, but lordy, these are absolutely, you know, breathtaking watercolors. The simplicity, and if I did get that word right, staccato, then Edward Seago was the master of it. He was absolutely unparalleled of being able to leave white paper and leave it absolutely expressively. And, you know, he would put it in or not put it in. You know, the painting, look at how much white paper is just left unanswered with paint. And it is such a simple thing to be able to do, and yet it's one of the most difficult things to achieve. And so many of us, when we're painting, we just don't even think about leaving lights and highlights with broken brush marks and unpainted surface. And yet this man just was absolutely a master at it. But it doesn't matter what painting you look at with Seago, whether it be an oil painting or one of his beautiful watercolors. But each and every one leaves you breathless. Now, every 2 years, I believe it's every 2 years, the Portland Gallery, I think in London, hold an exhibition of, they are the executors of the estate of Edward Seago. So every 2 years or so, they create a brand new catalogue and hold a brand new show. Now, I went there, I believe, 2 years, so there may well be another one coming up in 23. Look out for it. Check out with the Portland Gallery if you're interested, and see if they're holding a retrospective of Seago's work. And although they hold a lot of his paintings, a lot are brought in from collectors who lend them for the show. Some of them are up for sale, and you don't want to know the price tags, but it is just worth a visit. And last time I went with a friend, we almost got kicked out because we just didn't want to leave. We just kept going round and round and round. They're lovely people there, but it's well worth going to see. But look at that. This is a beautiful winter scene. It's an oil, but you can see it in watercolor too. And I'll find you a very quick watercolor of a very similar situation. I'm not going to, but look at that. What a lovely summer's day. Now this is, I think, on Walbersbeck Beach or something like that. What does it say? well, it says a Norfolk beach, but one of the areas he was a lot of work done is Walbersbeck and other beaches around that coastline. But look how simple this is. Just a little boat motif here, a few people, lots of white space. You can see that everywhere. Look at that sky. How simple is that? You know, it's just a few strokes, a few missed marks, and you can see that sun and that light punching through. Outstanding. Anyway, enough. I keep gushing. I mean, I can talk all day about Edward Seago, but Ron Ranson did a great job with these books, and careful of that. I am very particular with my books, but this is just the other one. You can see the great man himself. He actually had a charmed life. I'm not going to go into that in this video because we'll still be here 2 hours from now. But he had a charmed life. He was a very sickly child, but he had a charmed life. Here, look at that. How simple is that? You know, almost a single wash down, and then just a few marks here. We've got a stream, a bush, a gate over some marsh area in Norfolk, and just a slightly heavier sky, which has been dry brush layered onto the surface. And it probably didn't take more than half an hour to do, but it's a stunning piece. It's so simple. And, you know, that is really where I look. Look at this one. I think that's an oil, but I love it. Well, I love all the work. All right, enough of that one. These two books from Edward Seago. This is a much older one from James Reed, and this one is by James Russell. A more modern, you can still buy this one if you go to the Portland Gallery. They do have a certain amount of copies of this, and you can buy it. But it is just a huge collection of work from the master. Now look at this. You've got an oil of Trafalgar Square, and you've got a watercolour of the same scene. They are different, of course, but look how detailed and beautiful that is. I bet most of that is white paper. It is amazing, but it just absolutely works. Simple studies. Look at this one. Beautiful studies. Now this is the boatyard on the Norfolk Broads, but it's just a very simple couple of boat houses, a few boats, a little bit of landscape, a bit of distant ground, and a beautiful cloud. You know. Anyway, yeah, I'm better sort of calm down a little bit, I think, and start finishing up. But anything like this is absolutely fantastic. This is an older book. Now, I will say that I do have a couple of copies of each, and I'm a little bit like that. I get a little bit anal, I think, when it comes to some of my books, because I love one to thumb through, and I don't know why, but I seem to have to buy another one that I don't actually ever look at. It's there, it's pristine. I want it to remain pristine. I don't know why that is, but I have books that I thumb through, and I find the older copy of the two that I've got in this case, and I don't do that to every artist. I've got a couple of Hildas, I'm owning up now, and I've got almost doubles of Edward Seago stuff, except the Ron Ranson ones, which are very expensive for some reason to buy. So again, this is an older book, and many of the plates in here are in black and white, but you can still learn a lot. Even if you just think of the tonality of a painting, you can still learn a lot about the washes and the way that you have the different degrees, almost like a notan, where you've got a study in black and white. And you can do these things yourself. You could actually reproduce that as a master copy, albeit not in colour, but you could actually create this as a notan, as a black and white study, and learn about the different degrees of value running through the whole of the picture, reading correctly from front to back as you go. So not worth getting, absolutely worth getting. So yeah, as I say, there's not as much colour in this one as you would like to see, because I've often seen books and I think, oh, why isn't that in colour? But when you get them, they are absolutely stunning. So another book to look out for. So Edward Seago and John Singer Sargent, Roland Hilder, Ted Wesson, Ron Ranson, John Yardley, Trevor Chamberlain. These are just a few. But I haven't brought out the books that I don't have that many of these days. A lot of my students have used them, and they are books about how to paint in watercolor. They are technique or instructional books. Now, there are many out there on the market, and you can buy into any one of them. And most of them, I've got very practical advice on terms of using different colors, different manufacturers' colors, the good and the bad of cheap paints and good paints, as it were, and different ways and methods of application, whether it's a wash or whether it's dry brush or whether it's layered, wet in wet. Well, it doesn't matter. There are lots of books out there that cover this. Collins is one book that does that. I think Search Press is another one that does several books on how to paint in watercolors. So all of those instructional technique books are there, and I wouldn't really want to advise anybody on any particular one. But a lot of artists, such as myself and others, are putting content out there which really deals with a lot of this as well. Every time we put out a tutorial, hopefully it's inspiring you to have a go yourselves, and at the same time experiment and learn a little bit more about watercolor as a medium. Now, one book I haven't actually gone into, and that's this one. Now, I have more recent times gone over to a lot more abstract work, or semi-abstract. It's a very, very funny term to use. I've been painting loose and abstracted types of paintings for donkey's years, and ever before I sort of wanted to call it abstract or anything, it's just a loose way of painting. It's a way of presenting an image in a very different way, and I've done this for a long, long time. But moreover, recently I've been looking at ways that I can actually push my painting in that direction. I have two camps and a foot in each of them. I love my representation. Say that again then. My representational artwork, but I also love playing around, splashing around on a piece of paper and seeing what I can come up with a particular motif in my head. Now, one of the people that I look to a lot is a guy called John Blockley, no longer with us. His daughter is really active and has gone on and taken on the abstraction, as it were, or the pushing of watercolor and the boundaries of watercolor. Anne Blockley, and I think I've got a book of hers as well, but certainly her father John. And this book is absolutely full of inspiration. It's how this guy has produced watercolors that are just above and beyond. I mean, they are so different, and they give you a very different look, a very different viewpoint. And again, you can play around with master copies and try out these techniques yourselves and see what you can do by pushing the boundaries of the medium itself. So it doesn't have to remain fully conventional in terms of painting. So there you go. I probably talked myself to death, and most of you have gone to sleep, switched off, and gone to watch the TV. I don't blame you. But if you are still with me, if you have found this interesting, it's just my take and how I feel about certain artists with watercolors. They have been inspirational to me, and they have guided me, and they've answered questions. They've raised a huge amount more in my head at times, but I love them, and I would never part with these books. And I would recommend everybody to seek them if they want to, and learn from them and enjoy them. Now, I have many other books. I have a large room full of art books, and these are just a few of my watercolor books. I have others. But I also have a lot more when it comes to oil painting and other media such as drawing and pastel and other things. So if anybody wants to see any of those at some point, put that in the comments as well, and I'll put a video together in the future sometime during this year and cover other media as well, although this is really a watercolor channel. But if you don't mind that, I'm happy to talk about my books. I love them. So on that note, I'm just going to say Look out for the details on the new course. It's going to be either launched at the end of January or the end of the first week of February. It's all the details are going to be under this show more tab, under the details under this video, maybe one or two other videos as well. There's going to be quite a bit of information appearing on my social media, Facebook and my Instagram. If you can't find links elsewhere, go there for them. Indeed, go onto my website, paulappsfineart.com, and you will see the details there, and they will link you through to the information you need to know. Now, it's going to be going on as a pre-sale, and basically what's going to happen there for the first, I think it's 67, odd number, I'll explain that some other time. The first 67 people who buy the course, or at least register to buy the course, those who actually buy it when it's released, will get it at a discounted price, and also with additional content in there that will not appear after the 67th person has bought the course. So it's just a little tempting hook to get you guys to get involved a little earlier. Save some money, enjoy the content, and get some more for your money as well. So anyway, enough of the plugging. I'm going to leave you with that thought. It's all about painting skies in watercolour, so it may well interest some of you. I hope it does. Worked very, very hard on it, and it does get released, as I say, in the next fortnight. So yeah, all it remains for me to say is don't forget I also have a Patreon. If you fancy getting involved with that, take a look at it. Lots of tiers, lots on offer. Well over 200 full-length videos for you to enjoy and get and learn from, and different tier structures from I think $3 to $20 odd. So lots to get your teeth into. I'd love to welcome you there as my latest Patreon. In the meantime, I'm just going to wish you guys all the very best with your painting. Look at your books, enjoy them, learn from them, and I'm going to see each and every one of you in a video next week, and I will be painting again. Take care. Catch you all soon. Bye bye.